Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
So in the 1970s and 1980s, California was terrorized by a man who was called the East Area Rapist. He was also called the original Night Stalker, and eventually he earned the title of the Golden State Killer. Now, this guy ultimately was responsible for 13 murders, 51 rapes, and 120 burglaries. So he was he ran around for decades around there, and there were a lot of people that were hurt from him, and it was just a horrible time and an ordeal, and especially after some of them. Yeah, I mean, in some of the communities that he targeted, they were just nice, beautiful communities, but after he would strike, the numbers of locks and both for doors and windows would just fly off the shelves, and people actually started defending themselves in any way they could. But because the police couldn't catch him, he just had this reign of terror. So one of my guests today is amazing woman. I love her to death, and I'm so glad to have her on. Her name is Jane Carson-Sandler. So Jane, welcome to the show. And thank you so very much for being patient with me and coming on.
Thank you, Jared.
So, Jane, you are the author of this book. It's called, I'm going to hold it up here. It's called Frozen in Fear. Now, this book describes your ordeal, but I wanted to have you on and so that you can, kind of tell the audience what you went through. I think one of the best things, let's just have you introduce yourself and just kind of give a little bit of background and then maybe describe what happened to you.
Yes, I was 30 years old at the time in the Air Force Reserves out of Travis Air Force Base, a flight nurse. And I was married to a Air Force pilot living in, I think I said, Citrus Heights, California. And I was also at that time going to school at Cal State University to get my Bachelor of Science in nursing. So this was October 5th, 1976. And at that time, I was busy with my little 3-year-old and just household duties and my reserve work every other weekend. And it was, 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning when my husband would normally go to work. And at that hour, my little 3-year-old was in bed with me snuggling. So I heard the garage door close, and then a few minutes later, I heard someone running down the hall with a flashlight, and I yelled out my husband's name, and I said, who is that? Is that you?" And of course it wasn't. Why would he be running down the hall with a flashlight? And I looked up, and there was this man with a ski mask on and these black gloves. I know he had these high top black sneakers on, but anyway, he was holding a large butcher knife at the time. And of course, I didn't have any time to react. I just screamed, and he kept saying, shut up, or I'll kill you. And it was really like, shut up, or I'll kill you. And I thought, oh my gosh, and I said, take whatever you want, take my money. What do you want? What do you want? And at first I didn't have any idea what he wanted. And then he then went and tied us up, both of us, my 3-year-old included. He tied our wrist and our ankles. He blindfolded both of us, and he gagged both of us. And that was really very, very terrifying. And then what was even more terrifying is he stood by my dresser and went through all the drawers, but then he took sheets. I don't know where he got them from, but all I remember is he stood there tearing cloth. And I thought, Oh my God, what is this man going to do to us? Is he going to hang us? I had no idea because I didn't know anything about the Golden State or the East Area Rapist at that time. So I had no history. So then what was even scarier is when he took my son away from me. That's why, that's what it was all about. Fear, fear. So, and I had no idea where he put him. And then when he took him away from me, I thought, what's his next move? Where did he put him? Did he hurt him? So then, uh, then he untied my ankles, and I knew what he was there for at that point. So while he was raping me, I didn't even pay any attention to it. All I paid attention to is, where's my boy? Frozen in fear, frozen in fear. Where did you put him? Where's my son? And that was that was the worst experience of my life, is not knowing what he had done with my son. So afterwards, he did put him back on the bed. Then he went into the kitchen and I don't know, he opened the refrigerator. I heard pots and pans being rattled. And I thought, oh my God, this son of a gun is cooking. And maybe he's taking stuff out of my refrigerator. And I thought, this is really sick. So he'd come back to check on us and he'd say, if I hear anything, I'm going to come back and kill you. Well, time went on. It was just getting light outside, and I didn't know if he was still there, but I was able to get my blindfold down with my tongue, and I saw that my son was asleep next to me. And I said, Jeff, I'm sorry. I said, wake up. We've got to get out of here. We've got to go. We've got to go. So I untied partially my ankles, I guess, and partially his, and we hobbled down the hall. And I noticed that the kitchen, the living room door that goes out front was blocked with a chair. So we went around to the other side through the kitchen, through the sliding glass doors, all the way around to the front gate, opened it up, and I just screamed and screamed and screamed. And our neighbor across the street came over and took us over to her home. Um, my three male policemen came. And the last thing I wanted to do was talk to three male policemen after I had been just raped. Then my husband came and took my son. Um, then this very sweet police officer, Carol Daly, she's my angel, and she's still my friend today. After more than 40 years, she showed up and she was so understanding and so kind and so patient with me. Um, and I was able to answer a lot of questions because of her presence. So she took me to the emergency room in Sacramento and stayed with me, I bet an hour. And you should see how I looked. Oh my goodness. I had a little bit of blood on my chest because he just scraped me with his large butcher knife. And then my hair was just all a mess and I had tears. I was such a hot mess, I'll tell you. So Carol stayed with me, but then she had to go because there were no cell phones at that time. So she had to go back to her vehicle and get whatever messages she had, but she had to leave. So finally, they didn't have anyone from the Rape Crisis Center at that time. I was taken in and seen by this male doctor. And one minute I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, knowing, oh my God, I had just almost been killed. We had almost been killed. I had just been raped. and and then a few minutes later, I was like joyous. I'm alive. We're alive. We're okay. So I think the doctor thought I was bipolar, I'll tell you, because I was going from I'm serious, one mood to the other. So the exam wasn't fun. But then also, what wasn't fun was this huge shot of penicillin in my butt, which really hurt. And then I had to take morning after pills because, you know, I, I could have I could have gotten pregnant by this evil monster. So then, when I got home, my husband was already ordering an alarm system for our home, and they even had an alarm button behind my bed. So it was a horrible time. I hated my home. I hated being there, but my husband was in the military, and stationed over at McClellan. So we still had to the following summer before we were going to be transferred anywhere. So every night we'd sleep, all three of us, in this king size bed, um, just in fear that he was going to return, in fear. And every night it seemed like there was a helicopter overhead with a light flashing down around the community, looking for this guy. So we lived like that for a long time. And then my husband had to go TDY a few times, so I had a friend come over and stay with me, but I still didn't feel safe. And of course, no one in our community felt safe. No one. I mean, it was just a very terrifying time. As you said before, all the all the shops were just sold out of every type of safety device you could buy. But this guy, I don't know, he he could jump fences. I think he had either been in the military or he was a cop. That was my thoughts right away. Because one thing that he said to me after he raped me, he said, "Oh, you look so good in the O Club." And I went, anyone that's not in the military would not be using the word O Club. That's something that we say for officers club. So that really then thought, well, maybe I know him from the military. And that really scared me because I go away on the weekends down to Travis and I'm thinking maybe he's somebody in my unit. So anyway, then I think one of the other things that happened that was just a really frightening event was that following spring, I was out in the backyard tanning myself while my son was asleep. And I was laying on my back and I had the top of my bathing suit down so I could get some sun. And then I felt these pebbles on my back. And I thought, well, the wind's not blowing. Why are these pebbles on my back? And then I thought, oh, it's nothing. And then pretty soon there were more pebbles on my back. And I thought, oh my God, it's him. It's him. So I ran inside, of course, pulled my top up, ran inside, called the police. They were there in my house in just a few minutes. They they thought maybe he had jumped over my back fence, which was high. And I followed them and I jumped over my back fence as well. Cut my hand. I still have the scar today. Um, and then they brought me home, and then they finally found some old codger up there in the fruit orchard who just wanted some kicks and just wanted me to turn over or something and see my breast. I don't know, but it wasn't the East Area Rapist.
Mm.
That was so frightening. And for years, I mean, Jared, for years, I was always looking over my shoulder. And so many times in the beginning, I'd look at a man and I think, oh God, that's got to be him. I did go finally to the Rape Crisis Center about 6 months after my attack. And I should have gone a lot sooner because before that 6 months was up, I was a mess. I was just depressed. I was still going to school, which was good for me at Cal State, but I was just an emotional wreck. Once I got to the Rape Crisis Center, I met other women that had been sexually assaulted, and that really helped me because I realized, Jane, you're not going crazy. Everything that you've experienced, they've experienced. So that time, that really truly helped me. And then we were able to PCS or move forward the following year. But still, I never knew who he was, where I was going to come in contact with him. So anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Uh, you know what? Even after reading your book, Jane, and getting to know you a little bit, just hearing that again, uh, first of all, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. Um, it's nobody should ever experience anything like that. It's just to me, and I've said this on multiple times on this podcast, is that personally, I think rape, it's bad enough when you're an adult, but especially children when they're raped, I think that is more harmful to society because of the psychological damages, especially when children are raped by somebody that they know and they trust. I think the ripples in the pond, if you will, the reverberating effects of some, a heinous act like that, where you're so damaged, sometimes not even physically, but also psychologically and mentally, that I think it's worse than being murdered. And so I mean, just listening to you describing it and the pain that I hear in your voice when you talk about, the act itself was horrible enough, but then between him, ripping the sheets and banging
Mm,
the pots and pans,
mm.
and like you said, he he grabbed control of you immediately, so he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He knew exactly how to control the situation. The flashlight was probably to blind you so that he could overpower you, and then from there, tying you up and blinding you, and um, it's just, to me, it was just like it seems like it was just a sick game for him. And but I'll bet, it's kind of like the Zodiac killer. Reading about himself in the newspaper was just as much of a thrill, and knowing that he had done all those things to you, as well as terrorized you from that point forward. Um, I don't know. I'm sure there's people with more understanding of, psychological things like this, than I have. But
Speaking of remembering,
yeah,
2 weeks prior to my assault, we were robbed. Someone had come in the house, and this eventually it was him. Someone had come in through my son's bedroom window and taken all of my rings that I had, that were special to me, very special. And when I came home from school that day from college, I asked my husband, "Did you take my rings and get them cleaned or something?" And he says, "No, why would I do something like that?" And I thought, "You're right. You wouldn't." But, so I had the police come and the whole 9 yards, and, they said, "Well, just be careful." Well, this was his MO, the Golden State Killer, because he would come in a couple of weeks ahead of time, and he did this in other homes, not just in mine, and he would get to know you. He
yeah,
took those rings for remembering who I am. He, of course, probably saw photos of me in the house, maybe in my military uniform. I don't know, but he got a lot of information about me just by coming in 2 weeks prior. So had I known that that was his MO, I would have been really on guard that this was his MO and he's gonna come back in a couple of
yeah.
weeks and attack me. But I
Well,
also what? I'm sorry.
you were the fifth victim.
Yes, I was. I was his 5th victim, but no one started knowing anything about the East Area Rapist until my assault, and then they go, "Oh my god, we have a serial rapist in the neighborhood." But I do wanna comment on, it was the most horrific event in my life, and also, having my 3-year-old, taken away from me. But, I have forgiven him. Uh, I have. I had to, because I was carrying this backpack of hate and anger and revenge for so long, and it was weighing me down. The other thing is, I look back and I think about all of the amazing folks like you that I have met in all of these years, and I wouldn't trade that for anything, because I have all my crime friends and just so many others that have reached out to me. So I really feel blessed as far as that's concerned.
Well, and I'm very, very glad to hear that. Of course, um, I would think that releasing that backpack, you said, and forgiving him, and moving on with your life. Number one, that takes away his power. So that's probably the last thing that he wants. But also, isn't that basically a requirement? For getting rid of anything that, well, I just know that anytime that I've been wronged, until I actually go through that process and forgive the person,
Right.
um, it doesn't mean you have to uh, associate with them or be around them anymore. But
Right.
uh, forgiving them and getting rid of that backpack, like you said, that just weighs you down so much. Until you do that, it's really, really difficult to even function in life, let alone be successful like you are.
Well, Jesus forgave us, and we have to forgive others. Then, at the end of my impact statement, when I was speaking to D'Angelo, the last thing I said is, D'Angelo, I'm a Christian, and one third of me wants you to know that I think I said, I forgive you or something. Now, I'm not sure exactly what I said, but one third of me, wishes you well or something, but three quarters of me wants you to go to hell. I did. So one third, okay, you got it. But the other three quarters, buddy, you go to hell. And yeah, I still feel that way. I do.
Well, you should. I mean, it's
Yeah,
yeah, just horrific. Now, once the four victims that were before you,
right.
was it similar? What happened to them?
I don't really know too much about it, but what I've read is that some of them had more traumatizing experiences that I did. I know a lot about the ones after me, of course, but I do know a few of them that I read. Their 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 experiences were not very pleasant. No.
Mm. Well, and it's actually fortunate that you were so early in his, career, if you want to say, but
Yeah.
his string of rapes, because like most of these serial rapists, they eventually the thrill isn't as much, and so they kind of get tired of it, so they
Right.
escalate. And uh,
Yeah.
when did he really start escalating and actually start murdering his victims?
Oh gosh, I really can't give you an exact time frame, but Carol Daly always said that he's going to escalate to murder. And thank God I wasn't one of his later victims, knowing that the Golden State Killer was in my house and I was going to be murdered because those folks knew about him
Yeah.
and how frightening that must have been. And I just, well, we call ourselves the sister survivors, but Debbie Domingo, she's a good friend of mine. Her mother and her mother's boyfriend were I think her mother was raped and they were brutally murdered by the Golden State Killer. Michelle Cruz White, her sister, her beautiful sister, was beaten to death and beaten beyond recognition and raped by the Golden State Killer. Beaten beyond recognition, this beautiful young girl. That was his last victim, his last rape victim. And then Margaret Wardlow, sweet friend too, sweet sister survivor, he raped Margaret when she was 13. So they're my sister survivors, and we all keep in touch and we all love each other. So, yeah, I'll tell you. But see, I have them in my life. I wouldn't have had them in my life prior. So last 40 some years have been, I should say, again, I always looked over my shoulder. I still do. I'm still careful. But yeah, he had us all in prison, not just me in prison. He had the whole community, states, different communities in
Yeah.
California, all in prison, not knowing when the next attack was going to occur. No one knew, and we didn't know if he was gonna come back.
We all have to remember this is so long. I mean, you were raped in 1976.
Yes, I was 30 years.
So, yeah, how many years ago was that?
Well, I'm 78 right now, so
Yeah.
I know it's a
Yeah, that
long
was
time ago.
almost 50 years ago. So,
No,
um,
times have changed.
yes. Well, but back then, it's important. I mean, you mentioned it based on, Carol Day, the
Carol
detective,
Daly, right.
that she didn't have a cell phone. So
Mhm.
back then, and I'm
Isn't
sure a lot of people listening to this right now, they're like, "What? Didn't have a cell phone? How,
I know.
how did you even survive?" It's like,
Exactly,
um,
exactly.
yeah, back then, yeah, the
You were
phone was
just a kid.
actually,
You were just born, Jared. I
yeah.
know, yeah.
Oh no, well, let's see. I was in 78. I was 11. So,
76. 76. You were
oh,
11.
76. So I was 9. So,
9. Oh my gosh, guy.
yeah. Well, um so yeah, if you're a millennial and you're listening to this, the phones used to actually be attached to the wall. Can you believe that? And you didn't have anything in your pocket that would actually communicate. And so when we wanted to call somebody, we literally had to go home or go to a payphone that was, a phone booth, and put a dime in it or something, and
Yeah,
then make the call and hope that somebody was home that could answer pick the phone up. Then they invented this thing called answering machines, which was a new revolution. That was fantastic. And, but, it's just things have changed so much today
they have.
that,
And one thing
uh,
that's really changed is the help that rape victims are now getting. They are certainly, they have folks now that go in with victims and stay with them during their exam. The
yeah,
rape crisis centers have really truly improved. My friend Chris Petretti, who I think she was raped in December after my assault, and she's out in California. She has just done such amazing things for rape victims. She has groups come
mhm,
over to her home. She has set up a safe room for victims to tell their story. Yeah, she is really such an advocate and just done so well. And I wanted to say one more thing about Chris. I'm just trying she was young, maybe 12, 13. Her parents told her after her assault she could not talk about it. So she kept this a secret for so many years. Can you imagine that?
um,
Oh my, yeah. Oh
yeah.
my.
See, and that's another thing that's changed is not just technology, but also just our methods and our understanding of
Right.
the trauma that victims go through, and so how to deal with that trauma is has developed. It's just so much better now. Back then, I think we all kind of had just the suck it up and deal with it mentality,
Right.
and especially men, that was just the way we grew up. You know, you
Well, we didn't talk about rape back then. I didn't want anybody to know I was raped. Oh my goodness sakes.
yeah,
But
well,
I remember going to an officers' wives club tea of some kind, and they were all talking about the uh, the East Area Rapist and what he was doing to women. And one woman said, "Oh, he's cutting off their nipples," and I had to leave. I had to leave because that none of that was true, and all
yeah,
this gossip was going around. And but I could not tell anyone because you just didn't talk about rape back then.
mm,
Just didn't talk. Now today, I don't care who knows that I'm a
yeah.
recovering alcoholic. I just celebrated 21 years
Oh,
of
good for you.
sobriety on the 21st of July. I'm sorry, on the 12th of July. And I don't mind telling people about that either. I'm proud of my sobriety and I'm proud of myself for what I've accomplished since my attack. So
And you should be, but
thank
it
you.
is so that's basically one of the ways that you dealt with it. Did you actually turn to alcohol,
Oh,
as part of the way to, like,
no, no,
self-medicate?
actually not really. I turned to alcohol when I retired from the military. I took my uniform off and I thought, what am I going to do with my life now? So I had a lot of time to start drinking, but that was in 99. So
Yeah,
no,
okay.
that was in 99. So no, I didn't.
So you were, and I just want to get this in here that you served how many 30 years,
Yes, sir.
and you retired as a full bird colonel.
Yes, I did.
Well,
Praise God.
that was always the rank that I wanted.
Oh,
That was my goal, is to,
you're funny.
I to have those eagles on my
Yeah.
shoulders. That was my
Well,
goal,
that was
and
that was pretty nice, I'll tell you. So was the retirement pay. Yeah.
yeah, that's another thing I missed out on. But no, I ended up just being a captain, and I finally got tired of it. And um, I always
But you
told my
were
wife, I always told my wife that when it stopped being fun, that's when I was going to stop.
but you
And
were a ranger.
yeah, I
Well, that's
was.
awesome.
Well, yeah,
Wow.
it was fun, and I jumped out of airplanes, and you know, repelled out of helicopters, and yeah, I was.
How do you
It
get
did.
tired of something like that?
Say that again.
How do you get tired of something like that? That
Well,
sounds very exciting.
oh, yeah, it was fun. Um, but it's the military. It's like you train for 3 months for 1 or 2 nights of
Yeah.
really exciting stuff, and so um, But, I was, my last is kind of a side note, but, my last station was in New Mexico, and I was part of, a training, unit that we were training, units that were headed over to Iraq,
Wow.
back in the early 2000s, and, so, we were training them how to clear buildings and check
Wow.
cars and that kind of thing. And then, that was National Guard, and so the general there was buddies with another guy, and they moved our whole unit around and really screwed us over. And so I just said, you know what, I'm really active with my career, my civilian career, and so screw it. I don't need this.
And what was
So
your civilian career?
well, at the time I was a pharmaceutical rep,
Oh,
but yeah, it's Um, and I did that up until my dad and I were talking, and my dad grew up so we grew up in Idaho. And so we were old school, and my dad he grew up on a ranch. And so
oh, I love it.
complaining to him just really didn't fly.
I bet.
Yeah. And so I was whining to him about how horrible my career was, and how it wasn't fun anymore. And he said, well, you know what? Stop complaining and come work for me. And
Oh,
so
good.
because he was about ready to launch the MVAC,
He
and
was. Oh my gosh.
yeah, and so he said, "Well, you've got everything. You got a sales background, you got a military background. That's all the things that I'm looking for.
Wow.
So come work for me." And so I was like, "All right." And that's how I
Mm.
got started with MVAC, and eventually we pivoted into forensics, and that's basically how I ended up here. So,
Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome. That's a great story. Is your dad still alive?
no, he passed away in 2009.
Oh, I'm
So,
sorry.
yeah, really sad, but um, no, but he's still up there, and I know
Mm,
he sees everything we're doing here and the cases we're helping solve, and
that's
um,
great.
yeah, obviously the MVAC wasn't used to help solve the Golden State Killer,
Yeah,
but DNA was. And
sure.
so it's really it's an exciting area to be in. And
I bet.
yeah,
Well,
well,
good for
yeah,
you.
you were a major part of helping catch this Golden State Killer. So um, I mean, my hat's off to you too, because if it wasn't for victims being able to tell their story and be able to kind of describe the MO and everything that happened to you. That
Right.
was all information that the detectives then logged, and they figured out what his MO was.
Right.
And well, which is one thing I think we really need to talk about is um, it eventually found out that this guy was a cop.
Yes. When I think about a policeman raped me, can you believe that?
I think he's lucky that he got caught the way he did, because
Yeah,
especially back then, I'll bet the rest of the police force would have just ripped him apart.
I think so too. Right. And they have him in a special area in prison, which, well, because they don't want him to be ripped apart by other inmates. So they have him in
Yeah.
a safe place. Really? Yeah. Let's move him. Let's move him.
Yeah,
That's
let a
not
little
nice to
justice
say.
hit
That's not
him.
nice
Yeah.
to say. But,
Yeah,
you
sometimes.
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. But sometimes I think a little street justice is what these guys actually deserve.
Well, speaking of street justice, just after he, raped me, I always had a picture of if he had been, caught, I would like to see him tied to a post, and I wanted to have him, mm, experience fear like he's never experienced. And I'd like to have him watch me walk up to him and unzip his fly, and the fear that he would feel of course, I have a knife in my hand, of what is she going to do to me? And he probably thought he's probably gonna use that knife. But that's the fear that I wanted him to experience,
Mm.
which because that was the worst part, the fear. the fear of what I experienced.
Yeah.
But now I just I just want to I'd love to sit and talk with him and say, D'Angelo, where did you put my son? You know, where did you put him? I want to know that. And I also want to know where okay, so you and then you put him back on the bed. That was great. But why me? Where did you see me? How long had you been stalking me? I'd like to know that too. I'll never know, and I'll never get my rings back because they're in some type of custody of some type. So I'll never get those back. But they're just the questions I like to ask him now without a knife in my hand.
Right. Which would be fairly intimidating.
Right.
Knowing, a rape victim coming at you with a knife, that'd be,
And your fly down. Yeah.
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 Well, so Jane, you kind of addressed this at the very beginning, but I think it deserves a little more exploring. You were so accomplished, and um, you're friendly now. You're jovial. You're just such a pleasure to be around. How was it that you were able to go from such a horrible traumatic experience to becoming a the person that you are now? How did you overcome it? I know forgiveness had to be a big part of that, but what else do you think contributes to that?
Oh, I think my faith, definitely. I have great faith, and God's gotten me through this. I think one thing that helped me again is being around other women that had been sexually assaulted. One of my officers that would come to my house every day, Richard Shelby, he was amazing. He'd come all the time and talk to me about my case and what was happening. And but he introduced me to other women that had been assaulted, not only by the Golden State Killer, but by other men. And I was able to go out and interview them and speak with them and hear their stories, uh, which helped me, and it also helped them. Eventually, I started facilitating groups in Beaufort, South Carolina, of women that had been sexually assaulted. And I did that for about, I don't know, more than 3 years. Uh, and again, that helped me, that helped them, just going around and telling your stories and how we could help each other. So I've always wanted to I guess my goal was I don't want anyone to go through what I went through in any way that I can help them. That was my goal. And one thing I always wanted to say is I wanted them to turn their pain into power. I wanted them to make their mess a message. And the main thing is pay it forward. You've gone through this. You've been there. I think too that one thing that was has always been missing is that men do not get therapy after a loved one has been raped, whether it's their wife, their mother, their sister, whatever. My husband didn't know how to handle me. How would he? He's never experienced anything like that. I had never experienced anything like that. So I think it's really, really hard. I just wanted to put this in about, males because they need the therapy just as much as we do because they have to deal with us. My husband had to deal with me, and I don't think he quite knew how to do it.
Well, uh, I've been
Yeah.
married over 30 years, and I still don't know how to handle my wife, but
Well, there you go.
and she hasn't gone through anything traumatic like that. But I just as a man, from my perspective, I would think that the number one trauma that he went through is the thought that he wasn't there to protect you.
Exactly, and that's why he went right ahead and put these alarm systems all over the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it
No,
was
but
hard
the
when he
the guilt I'm sure
yes.
that he went through, and
Mm.
then seeing the pain that you were in and not being able to do anything about it.
But he
Uh,
didn't get help. Me
yeah.
Men just don't go for help, and they need it, Jared, they need it.
Well, there's men are just different as far as
Would you
you
go for
know,
help? Would you go for therapy?
I don't know. I don't know what I would do. I it's
You'd get your gun and go hunting for him.
yeah.
My husband wanted to kill
Well,
us, son of a bitch.
I would hope so, just like I was on a call last night with an officer out of Pennsylvania. His name's Clee Tillman, and his guest was an expert with, police trauma.
Ooh.
And that was one of the big things that they were talking about, is that, there's so many men that don't go to counseling, they don't do therapy, even when they have extreme,
Mhm.
like officer involved shootings and things where there's
Mm.
PTSD.
Right.
But the important thing is, men in general, um, we all kind of have this attitude that, nobody cares, because we're a guy and nobody wants to hear a guy whine about his
Anything.
circumstances. And
Sure.
it's just really different from men than it is for women. But
Right.
the trauma that you experience is still there, and it has to be dealt with. And those that don't deal with, that's why there's so many military and police suicides, is because they don't get help. And so
Right.
they absolutely should.
I still have triggers. If I'm watching television show and I see ski masks, that's a trigger.
Oh,
That's a
yeah.
trigger, a ski mask. Yeah. And then the other trigger is when a helicopter flies overhead. I immediately think of being back in Citrus Heights in that helicopter with that light going down around the neighborhood. So that they're really just, and then of course, if anybody yells, shut up. That's so they're my three triggers. So I try to avoid all three.
So one other thing, I know you said Carol Day, the
Carol Daly,
detective, yeah,
yes,
that came and helped you, is still your friend today.
she is.
What
She's my angel.
So just kind of describe her a little bit. What was it about what she did that day that helped you so much?
She she was a female. She understood. She had dealt with other rape victims. She was so she was a great listener. She was so kind and caring that I felt safe with her. In the past years, I've stayed with her in Sacramento. We send each other Christmas presents. We talk. She's just the best, and she had been in the police force for a long time. She's just an amazing woman. She's my hero. She and
Yeah,
Paul Holes. She and Paul Holes. Can we talk about Paul Holes for a few minutes? I love
of
Paul Holes.
course,
He knows
everybody
Paul Holes.
knows, well,
Yeah,
anybody that's in the forensics
right,
industry knows who Paul Holes is. And
right.
so why don't you tell us, for those that
Oh,
don't know who he
no.
is and
No,
what he did?
I'm not gonna do that because I would be talking for an hour, and we don't have that much time, so no,
Well, okay. The bottom
he's
line
my
is
hero.
Paul Holes worked for Contra Costa Sheriff, correct?
He did,
And he was assigned this case, and he was one of the ones that originally came up with the concept of genetic genealogy and using ancestral lines to actually trace, because they had evidence from all of these rapes and murders,
right,
but they didn't have anything to compare it to. So he was one of the ones that came up with the idea of using genealogy
right,
to trace his family and kind of narrow down the suspects. So then
right.
they could actually make it manageable. The number of suspects would be manageable. So, but as a person, just give me a brief idea of why Paul is so special for you.
I've been with him at, a few crime cons. He always has time for us sister survivors. I've been on TV shows with him a couple of times. I remember we were on what was the last one we were on? Oh, I know, Dr. Oz.
Hmm.
Um, I think he was on Megyn Kelly too with me. But anyway, the bottom line is, Paul is one of these, mm, smart, kind, again, a great listener, a friend, someone I can trust. Um, I was just with him at our last crime con that we just had, and and that was at the lovely Opryland Hotel in Nashville, and we were at a meeting together, and he just has the best ideas. He's now he just texted me the other day and asked me if I would follow up with a woman that he had heard from, and she wanted to do an interview with me, but he's just the kind of guy, he's like just like a good friend,
Hmm.
and, He's just always been there for me. And and again, he was the one that was basically responsible for the capture of the Golden State Killer. So, yeah, and
Yeah.
I love him. He knows that. My husband even knows that I love Paul Holes.
Mm.
Everyone loves Paul Holes, not just Jane.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's just to give you an idea. Um, I've been to 4 crime cons, I think, and I've actually never met him. So,
well,
I mean, he's always so busy. He's constantly surrounded with people,
he is.
and
He is.
and I'm always running around crazy. So
Well,
it's just one of those
I
where,
went to that party they have before CrimeCon starts,
uh-huh,
the night before, and Paul was there. So we sat down on a bench, and I had to have someone block us because there was a line of people that wanted to come up and talk to Paul.
yeah,
I'm serious. It's like and when we were in Vegas, I'll never forget, we were all he was going to meet us sister survivors for lunch, and just walking through the crowds. I mean,
oh yeah,
yeah, he
yeah,
stopped every 5 minutes.
yeah.
So
No,
yeah, he's
in the crime con arena, he's I mean, he may as well be Paul or Tom Cruise,
exactly. Oh, exactly. Yeah.
walking
And you know
through
what?
just,
He knows that, and he's humble.
yeah,
He's humble, and I
yeah.
respect him so much for that. But listen, if you come to Denver, I'll introduce you to him. Okay.
Well, I'll be there. Of course, I'll be there.
Okay. All right. He'll be there, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
and one of my things is I'm going to bring some help,
Yeah.
um, because in Nashville, I was there with the MVAC. I was there,
Mm,
and with with the all things crime, and it was just
okay.
me. And so it's just over. Yeah, you can't do it. You can't do it and still be able to mingle and go meet people. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, that was a harsh lesson for me to learn there. So
Okay.
I was exhausted. I
I
was,
bet you were.
yeah. Anyway, well,
Very good.
Jane, one last question for you. Now that the Golden State Killer is in prison, and especially once, like, where do you remember where you were when you learned that he was caught?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, definitely. I was at a hotel in North Carolina. My husband and I were just returning from a trip to Germany, believe it or not, and, I got a message from Larry Crompton saying he's been caught, and I remember I screamed, and woke up everyone in this hotel because I was just so elated, just screamed. Um, so yeah, I remember. I'll never forget.
So since then, how has things changed for you? I mean, if you think about the day prior versus now,
Oh,
uh, just how has things changed for you knowing that he's in prison and he's
mm,
gonna die there? He
mm,
lives in a cell by himself for probably 23 hours a day.
right, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
So
not cooking pot roast anymore like he was the day he was caught. Every year, the year I'm just trying to date, April, maybe 24th, when he was caught, w we make pot roast to celebrate the fact that he's in prison.
yeah,
Yeah.
didn't when the police knocked on his door, didn't he say, "Well, I've got a pot roast in the oven." So
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, sorry, Joe, I don't know if they feed you pot roast in prison, but you're not gonna be cooking one anymore. But
yeah,
no,
I hope not.
I just went from a life of before he was caught of I mean, I was okay, but it was always there. It was always, "When is he alive? Um, is he dead? Are we ever gonna know?" So
Yeah,
now that was the thing. Are we ever gonna know? And some people thought he was dead, and I thought, I don't know. I think
yeah.
he's still out there." So
There's only a few out there, and thanks to forensics and different types of technologies, uh,
right,
cell phone triangulation, those kind of things. I just don't think people can get away with crime the way they used to.
exactly.
Yeah, especially the heinous crimes. Once we know that there's a serial rapist or killer out there, there's so many resources that they can bring to bear,
Yeah,
that I think it's a lot harder to get away with something like that nowadays than it used to be. And so which is why I don't think you really, I mean, of course, you hear about the mass shootings and things like that, but those are just like usually just one-time events. The concept of somebody being able to continually do crimes for 20, 30 years, just
Can you
that
imagine?
day's over.
I think about the police that were trying to find this guy. Can you imagine how frustrated they were? I mean,
Yeah,
every day in the newspaper, it was 16, 17, 21. I mean, all of these rapes. It was crazy. It was absolutely nuts.
yeah.
And you couldn't get them, you know?
Well, and especially once let's see, so 1976 is when you were number 5.
Right.
Do you remember when the first murder happened?
No, I don't remember the date.
Okay.
No,
Well,
don't.
if I recall, it was something like, 10 or 12 years later,
Exact Oh, yeah, yes,
we
it was.
actually started killing people, and that's,
Yes, yes.
but
And
part of that is
that had
yeah,
been predicted. That had been
but
predicted.
he 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 knew in different positions, and I think he's the opposite of what most police officers are, where I think he literally became a police officer in order to be able
Mhm.
to have more freedom and stalk more victims, as
I
opposed
agree.
to 99.9% of all officers become officers because they wanna protect the community,
Exactly.
and this guy's motives were completely opposite, so,
I
uh,
think one of the worst cases that I can imagine is when, um, a couple are together and he comes in and puts plates on the man, and then, takes the woman in the other room and rapes her.
yeah,
That to me is just, oh my gosh, talk about needing therapy after that. And
uh,
I have friends that have been through that,
yeah,
that had been raped by him. Oh my gosh. How do you get through that? How do you get through something like that? And again,
well,
not knowing when your wife has been removed from the bed, whether or not she's your wife's gonna be murdered or what's gonna happen to her, and you can't do anything about it because he is in complete control.
yeah,
That's what it was all about. That's what rape's all about, control,
yeah.
control,
If you're run-of-the-mill, rapist, it's just, the the act itself and just getting
power,
done, and then but for guys like him, yeah, it's all about control, it's all about
power.
the lingering, trauma that he would cause, the thought that he could
Mhm.
actually be in your head for, uh,
Oh, years.
decades afterwards. I mean,
Right.
that's what thrilled him, and that's what makes it all the more sick, but
That's why I wish I could get rid of my triggers because he still has a bit of control with those triggers, but hey,
yeah.
it is what it is, as my son always says. "It is what it is, mom."
Well, the good thing is you're able to use all of that, and you're able to help others because of it, and,
That's right,
uh,
that's my plan.
yeah, well,
Got
and
to
you're
use it. You gotta pay it forward. You gotta make your mess a message. You gotta turn your
that's
pain
right,
into power,
that's
truly.
right. Well, Jane, you're an amazing, amazing woman,
Oh,
and
you're sweet to
I
say that,
can't tell
Jared.
you, how much I appreciate you coming on and just being you, but telling your story so other people can hear, really how, you've overcome, uh, the problems that caused, but, you're it's hard to describe how much I, not just adore you, but also just, you I
Jared, you're too
Jane,
kind. Jared, you're too
you're an
kind.
incredible, incredible person, and, just knowing
I'm
but even
not.
writing your book, people that read your book, some people might read it to, just to hear about the actual experience, but I think what's more important are all the thoughts that you put in there to, to help you overcome the trauma and but looking outside of yourself and then helping other people get through their trauma, to me,
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
that's what being an angel is all about right there. So,
Well, you're the best, Jared, and I so appreciate you, and I
oh,
really
you know what?
I do. I look
I
forward to seeing you in Denver, my friend.
oh, me too. So once again, everybody that's watching and listening, here's the book, Frozen
Thank
in
you.
Fear by
Thank
Jane Carson-Sandler. So
thank
make
you.
sure to order a copy. It's a small book and it's a quick read, but it's packed with just incredible information and experiences. So definitely
Thank
go
you.
out there and order that. But most importantly, make sure to try to be more understanding and more helpful for people that experience some kind of trauma like that, because yeah, it's hard to even listen to, let alone experience. And so, I think a little more patience in the world would be really good right now.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.